Welcome, everybody. My name is Derek Marks. I am one of the coaches for your San Ramon Valley mountain bike team. And I've put together this little video presentation as a means for you to better understand how to maximize your nutrition for optimum performance. A little bit about me real quickly. I am a professor at St. Mary's College in the kinesiology program, so I teach classes in sport nutrition. I also direct the human performance lab there, so some of you have been into that lab for some performance testing. And I've also been the performance nutritionist for the St. Mary's College Department of Athletics since about 2007. So I've been doing nutrition-related activity with athletes and teams for several years now. So I'm really excited to share some of this information with you all. The conversation, I think, should begin with sort of a big picture idea of where nutrition fits into performance, looking at this very cryptic performance pie chart, right? Nutrition fits into this scheme of things. You need to have all these pieces of the pie in place to maximize your performance. Training, of course, is a big piece of it. Coaching needs to be there. Rest and recovery is something that's often ignored and sometimes you don't have too much control over. Even psychological aspects of performance need to be considered in addition to nutrition to maximize performance. And depending on the sport and the situation, the athletes themselves, these different pieces of the pie have a different influence or different significance. Ultimately, why should you care about nutrition? I recognize, right, this is most of you are probably being fed by someone else. You're not out there cooking for yourself or out there buying your own meals for the most part. I know there's going to be a whole range of circumstances amongst your group, but nutrition should be considered. Why? Because it will absolutely help your performance, and both on and off the bike, right? And it doesn't just apply to your cycling, but it also applies to your academics and your overall health in terms of how often you get sick and all that kind of stuff. That first bullet there in red, stronger, faster rides, no bonking. Yeah, that's one of my goals for this discussion, is to set you up on a strategy, on a plan to make your rides a little bit more productive, a little more effective, a little faster, right, is probably the best way to say that, and also to avoid the bonking. I know several of you have reported to me, or I've heard in conversations that, yeah, I bonked during this ride, or yeah, I bonked during that race. We can avoid that. And bonking doesn't equal good performance. Other things that good nutrition can do are in those bullets below. Yeah, recovery time, meaning you're ready to ride again more quickly. Increased muscle power, strength, endurance, improved immune function, even things like better attitude and motivation. A lot of athletes that I work with, they get overwhelmed with life in general. Surely some of you are at that point as well, and cycling starts to become sort of not the biggest priority. And that loss of motivation, that change in attitude, sometimes is because nutritional choices aren't that great. A quick couple of slides on the macronutrients, because when I start talking about specific nutrition for performance, nutrient timing is what we're going to call it, you need to know a little bit about carbohydrates and proteins at the very least. And so carbohydrates are what our body's preferred fuel source is for exercise. This is the fuel, this is the food that your muscles are absolutely burning, almost like gasoline in a car, right? They're burning carbohydrates to provide the energy for you to pedal your bike. It's pretty much that straightforward. Choosing the right type of carbohydrates does go a long way in helping performance. The one drawback about carbohydrates is that we don't store very many carbohydrates in our body. Those of you that have bonked, usually, and it can be from multiple things, but usually bonking is because your body's run out of carbohydrates as an energy source. It's almost like a car running out of gas. It's like you're done. So because we don't store carbohydrates very well, we need to be really mindful about the types of carbohydrates that we eat and when we eat them. Good sources of carbohydrates in general, whole grains, we're talking your brown rice, your quinoas, the things that are very close to nature. Vegetables are very high in carbohydrates, as well as things like potatoes, which are vegetables, sweet potatoes, white potatoes as well. I'm not saying you should go out and eat French fries, but a baked potato or, that type of source of potato, not potato chips. Oatmeal is fantastic. Beans, those of you that love Mexican food or love to eat beans in general, yeah, fantastic. Fresh fruits are also a good source of carbohydrates. The choices that you should avoid, really it comes down to avoiding sugar. Please, do your best to not consume too much sugar throughout the day. I'll talk a little bit about that later. So things like soda, candy, sports drinks. I put the asterisk next to the sports drinks because there is a time where sports drinks are appropriate. We'll get to that. White potatoes can be tricky. I know I said that they can be a good source. White potatoes in the context of French fries and potato chips, not a good source. Cereals can be tricky as well. Most cereals are just complete sugar bombs, right? You have your cereal that pretends to be healthy and you look at the ingredients list, it's like, oh my gosh, the first 5 ingredients are basically sugar. So be careful with cereals. There's some good ones out there. Highly processed wheat products are also a little bit dangerous in terms of carbohydrate choices. Yep, there's some good breads out there, some great pastas out there. I'm not saying you shouldn't eat pizza, but the closer to nature that food is, again, looking at the good sources, the better the carbohydrates are going to be for you and the better your body's going to be able to use them as an energy source. The other macronutrient I want to talk about is protein. Protein's a pretty big deal. With carbohydrates, I said, yep, they're just about the energy. Protein is pretty much about everything else. Tissue building and repair, they help with metabolism, meaning that your ability to break carbohydrates down and use them as an energy source. They help with fluid balance. They help with hormone production, which a lot of you have that going on all over the place. So proteins are a really big deal. In terms of protein needs, and I kept this in here even though we don't have the opportunity to really discuss the details of it, all of you should be aiming to get about 0.5 gram to 1 gram of protein per pound body weight per day. So if you weigh 100 pounds, you should be looking to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 100 grams of protein into your body a day. I know that doesn't mean anything because if you don't know how much protein is in the food source, how are you going to know how much you consume? If you found this video, you found my website, and there's a link on this website, on this page, that has a list of protein content in common foods. Generally speaking, the size of a computer mouse or maybe a small fist of a meat product, whether it's fish or chicken or steak or whatever it is, that's usually about 30 grams of protein. 1 egg has about 8 grams of protein. A glass of milk has about 10 grams. A cup of yogurt also has about 10 grams. Unless it's Greek yogurt, then it usually has about 20 grams. So if that's giving you an idea, it's not tons of protein, but every meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, should have a significant protein source in it. And if you look at the good sources on this page, things like meat, fish, eggs, good dairy products, and these need to be all quality, right? Quality meats, quality fish, quality eggs, right? So nuts are a fantastic source. Beans are also a good source, and I know beans were on the carbohydrate list. Yeah, beans are both good carbohydrate and protein source. Lots of vegetables as well are both good carbohydrate source and protein source. And there's some soy products out there that can also be used as a good protein source. Bad choices of protein foods: avoid fried proteins, so your fried chicken, that kind of stuff. Processed meats, your bolognas and that kind of thing, and even sweetened dairy. And I know that is tough, but yogurt is an amazing food. But when they add flavor to it, whether it's vanilla yogurt or some fruit flavored yogurt, the amount of sugar they add to that yogurt literally kills the quality of that food source. So have your yogurt, but have it plain. Add your own love to it, whether it's granola or nuts or whatever that is. All right, so the real main purpose of this discussion is to talk about nutrient timing. And nutrient timing is sort of a sport nutrition term that is in reference to when you should eat and what you should eat in respect to training and recovery. The biggest take-home message I'm going to sort of emphasize, at least at this point, is this bullet in the middle of the screen that says, don't train hungry. Training hungry is a huge, huge mistake. If you're hungry before you train, your brain is telling you that it thinks, whether or not it does or doesn't, but your brain is telling you that it thinks it needs food. 2 things are going to happen if you train hungry. Firstly, training is not going to be the same quality as it would had you not been hungry. Without getting into too many details, the brain will control how much muscle you can activate when you train. So even though you think you're pushing it your hardest when you're trying to train hungry, your brain kind of is pulling the reins back on your muscle activity, saying, I think we need food and I'm not going to let you work out too hard. And so the research is pretty strong to support this. Training hungry equals lower intensity or lower quality performance. Secondly, if you're training hungry, it's a sign that probably you may have low blood sugar, you maybe have low carbohydrate status. Training while hungry is going to lead to a greater use of protein as an energy source. In other words, you're going to be using your muscles. Your body will break your muscles down and turn them into energy so you can turn the pedals. All of you should very much take care of the muscles that you're growing. And so don't train hungry. It causes a couple of really negative outcomes. In terms of nutrient timing, I'm going to talk about the pre-exercise phase, the exercise phase, and the post-exercise phase. This slide and the next one are going to show it in text, and then the third slide is going to actually have a graphic that demonstrates the whole, sort of going to repeat what I'm showing you right now. When we look at pre-exercise nutrition, if we start about 3 hours before a session or before a race, just eat real food. In other words, eat a regular meal. If it's a morning, if you have a late morning session and you wake up at 7, you have a ride at 10, have a typical breakfast. Have your eggs, have some oatmeal, have whatever you normally would have. That's a good balanced meal. Make sure there's some protein in there and some good carbohydrates. No real restrictions. One of the goals of pre-exercise nutrition is to make sure that there isn't too much food in your stomach. So the closer we get to a training session or a race, the more we have to be conscious about the types of food we choose so they get digested and out of our stomach quickly. Riding with a big old burrito in your stomach, that burrito is not doing you any good. It's going to weigh you down and probably make you feel pretty uncomfortable. So as we get a little bit closer to a training session, about 1 to 2 hours out, start thinking about smaller meals. So let's say you're at school, we have a 3:30 training session, and it's, let's say it's 1:30 or 2 o'clock. Maybe you can have a snack between your last classes there. What should you have? Don't have a big meal, right? It takes a couple of hours for most foods to get out of your stomach. So when we get to within that 1 to 2 hour range, focus on carbohydrate foods. Some good examples, a small sandwich, half a bagel with some spread, maybe cream cheese or whatever you like to put on your bagel, some cheese and crackers, peanut butter and banana sandwich, all kind of easily digested foods that aren't too heavy, so to speak. Once you get within an hour to training, so let's say it is 2:30 or even 3 o'clock, and you're going to be on your bike in less than an hour, make the snacks even smaller. Even a Cliff Bar could be okay in this situation. Any of the examples from the bullet above, but maybe a smaller version of it, so half a sandwich instead of a whole sandwich, that kind of idea. And then you get to 20 minutes. So let's say you show up to a race or to a training session and you're going to be pushing the pedals in less than, let's say 15 minutes or so. You start getting into liquid nutrition. Having a sandwich 20 minutes before a ride, unless it's going to be a really, really long ride, sandwich before a ride is going to sit in your stomach for most of the ride. So liquid energy at that point is ideal. So within 20 minutes, go for some sort of sports drink, whatever hydration drinks you have. Hopefully they have some energy in them, some carbohydrates, maybe a little bit of protein. Some of them have that now. But that would be the ideal choice. During exercise, that pre-exercise setup really is setting the stage to maximize your training, right? The goal with the pre-exercise nutrition is to fill your tank with carbohydrates and energy. You want to make sure you go into a session having a full tank, right? During exercise, we need to try and keep up with the energy that we're using. If it's a training session that's less than an hour, which usually doesn't happen for you all, for us, unless we're doing something at the 24-hour fitness on the spin bikes. If it's an hour or less, water's going to be fine. You're not going to go through your carbohydrates and run out of energy in that hour typically. If it's greater than an hour, and a session of an hour's length or longer, you are going to be at risk of running out of carbohydrates or bonking, right? And it depends. It depends on how you started the exercise session. If you really filled the tank, you could probably go a couple hours before bonking. If you come in depleted, I had a bunch of exams today, I forgot to eat, I had this going on, that going on, and I show up to a training session already depleted, you can run out of energy, carbohydrates, in a very short amount of time. So for sessions longer than 60 minutes, mix it up. A water and a sports drink, go for it. If you like to eat while you ride, the longer the session, the more I emphasize food, especially early on, whether it's a Cliff Bar or whatever type of bar you like to eat. They have the gummies and the blocks and some of the more candy-like energy sort of supplements. Go for it. The things to avoid while you're training: don't go for acidic fruits. Things that are acidic will sit in your stomach for a long time and not give you much energy. So don't bring a pocket full of oranges on your ride. And try and maximize consumption of energy. And so we'll talk a little bit about numbers, but generally we're aiming for in the neighborhood of about 30 to 50 grams of carbohydrates an hour. Most sports drinks, let's say your standard bottle of Gatorade, 16 ounces, gives you somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 grams of carbohydrates. So if you can put down a 16-ounce Gatorade every hour while you're racing, you are going to really minimize the chances of first running out of energy, maximizing the chances of you performing your best. After exercise is a huge, huge deal when it comes to adapting to your training. And all your training is doing is trying to make you a better cyclist. And by doing so, you're breaking your body down while you train and then trying to replace what you used with your post-exercise nutrition, with your recovery nutrition. So one point, again, kind of like the don't train hungry, this is my next big take-home message, is absolutely make sure you get some sort of recovery drink in your body within 10 minutes of a training session. The faster, the better. And so you should, ideally, in the athletes that I work with at St. Mary's, I make sure that on the court, on the field, wherever they're going on the track, that they have a chocolate milk or a muscle milk or some sort of combination protein carbohydrate drink in their bag. So when they're done with their training session, as they walk from wherever they went to their car, to the locker room, they drink that immediately. It helps your body recover, and it helps your body recover optimally when you do that. After that recovery drink, within the next hour or two, then have a regular meal. So whatever that meal is, a good real food type of situation. So that's the recovery the nutrient timing strategy. From a visual standpoint, I like to present it this way as well because it kind of gives you an idea of what's going on with your day. As you can see in the screen here, we have a timeline that goes from 3 hours before a ride. In the middle of the screen, then we have your ride or your race, right? It could be either one. Then IPE is immediately post-exercise, and then after that comes a 1 to 2 hour window. So if we're looking at, and then this is redundant from earlier, but still follow along with me. I have some examples of foods at least. If you're 3 hours out before a ride, if it's a morning ride, your typical breakfast is fine. If it's an afternoon ride, have a sandwich with an apple and some almonds for lunch or whatever that mixed meal is, totally fine. Typically, foods that we eat will be out of our stomach in that 3 hour time window, so we're going to be able to benefit from their nutrition, and they won't be sitting in our stomach when we try and exercise. When we're in that 1 to 3 hour window, be mindful of the foods you eat. Stay away from high fat foods and high protein foods. Those tend to stay in the stomach longest, so go for smaller meals that are easy to digest. Some of you kind of know what sits well with your body. A big old carne asada burrito, probably not. Maybe a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, maybe some yogurt with granola, plain yogurt, of course, right? Hard-boiled egg and a banana, that kind of food, those kinds of foods, easy to digest, and they provide good nutrition. As you get to within an hour of a training session, have a even lighter snack, right? You don't want to start a training session with a full stomach. I know I'm being redundant, right? So have a Cliff Bar, maybe half of a Cliff Bar. It doesn't have to be a Cliff Bar, and that's why I put the asterisk there. Whatever type of bar that you like and you choose to eat. But it's maybe a piece of fruit like a banana with some almonds or banana and peanut butter. Maybe half a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? Within an hour, you don't want to overeat. 20 minutes before training or a race, start thinking about, hey, I should switch over to liquids. Right now, whatever I'm putting in my body, I want to benefit from it soon. So have something liquid, but you can also have a very light snack. And again, maybe a half of a sports bar, that kind of thing is fine. It really does depend at this point how long the ride or race is going to be. That follows. The longer the ride or race, the more I would emphasize eating a little bit of solid food in that 20-minute window. Nothing that's going to upset your stomach. So it does tend to be things like bananas and sports bars. But you'd want to, again, the goal up until this time is to top off your energy stores and make sure you have energy to last throughout your event. Once we get to the ride or the race, like we said before, if it's less than an hour, water's fine. If it's greater than an hour, and notice the thickness of the arrows that are pointing from the boxes to the timeline, the thicker they are, the more important it is. If it's greater than an hour, make sure you consume some sort of energy drink that is high in carbohydrates. Most sports drinks are designed high in carbohydrates. Some of them throw some protein in there as well. That's okay, as long as you do okay with them. There's some great drinks out there. There's too many for me to mention. If you ever have questions, ask me. I'm happy to talk about it. But consume carbohydrates at a rate of somewhere to 20 to 60 grams an hour. Like I mentioned before, Gatorade has a bunch of versions out there now, but the standard Gatorade, I believe that 16-ounce Gatorade has in the neighborhood of 40 grams of carbs in it. If you can put one of those down in an hour, that's pretty good, right? You're going to be giving your body the energy, the carbohydrates it needs to sustain high exercise intensity. Don't be a hero. Don't try and be like, I just do water, I don't do anything. That's going to lead to bonking or even worse, right? So make sure that you provide yourself the best opportunity to succeed by giving yourself those carbohydrates in the longer rides and races. Immediately post-exercise, IPE, get that chocolate milk down or whatever you have as a recovery drink. It doesn't have to be chocolate milk. It doesn't have to be chocolate cow's milk either. Now, I know some of you may not do dairy, so chocolate soy milk, there are alternatives that work. Chocolate milk, because of the ratio of carbohydrates to protein, is really good. Some of those alternative milks, the almond milks and the rice milks, they don't quite have as much protein, but still they're better than nothing. So go for that. And then as soon as possible, within the next couple of hours, have a good balanced meal, right? And that's sort of the timeline. That's the strategy. It's pretty standard for most sports and most athletes. As cyclists, right, you do typically train longer than most other sports, right? At St. Mary's, I work with basketball and I work with soccer and I work with cross country. You're kind of in a unique zone even compared to all those sports because, their training sessions are typically short but really intense. Some of the runners do longer stuff, but you really need to emphasize this nutrient timing more so than most athletes that I'm talking with right now. So, all right, couple other little bullets that I may have not covered during the face-to-face talk, but one thing that's really important to help support your performance is sleep. I'm not going to tell you to go to bed earlier or wake up later. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. But what I want to do is at least emphasize to you and explain to you that sleep should be a priority. The lack of sleep can change the way your body responds to training. Of course, it changes the way you perform in school. Children and adults who don't sleep enough are obviously more tired throughout the day. Things like reaction time, muscle endurance, even ability to adapt to exercise because it changes hormones and changes the balance of hormones can be affected. So try and make sleep a priority. It also affects things like immune system function, so you tend to get sick less if you sleep more. It's a big ask, but I still like to throw that out there. All right, I'd like to finish off with a nice top 5 list, top 5 ways to improve your performance. Obviously, this is through nutritionally related types of things that we talked about today. Number 5, stop eating sugar. Should probably be number 1 on the list, but yeah. I know the reality of our food supply, and I know the fact that a lot of you don't necessarily have control over what you eat 100%, but sugar in general, sugar added to foods, does not help your performance in any way. You know that during exercise, that would be the one time, but other than that, get off the sugar. It can only lead to good outcomes. Number 4, don't train hungry. That was one of my big take-home messages. Hey, bring a snack with you. If you don't have much time after school to your 3:30 training session, throw something in your backpack or your bag or whatever and eat that before you train. It's going to make a difference. Sleep more. Yes. Avoid processed foods. We didn't talk much about making good food choices overall, but yeah, the more real foods that you can eat, the things that aren't processed, packaged kind of things that you look at and they're like, was this actually a natural food product or what the heck is this? The more natural things that come from the earth, right? Those types of foods will go a long way into helping you grow and perform. And then finally, my number 1 way to improve your performance, eat more home-cooked meals. Sounds kind of hokey and like, really? Yeah, absolutely. Going to restaurants, letting other people cook that food for you, you don't know what went in it. Typically, they add things like sugar and unnecessary fats and salt and all these other kinds of things that your body doesn't need to make it taste better. Cook for yourself or let somebody else cook for you at home. It is the biggest difference maker out of anything. So, I hope you enjoyed it. That's my webpage. You're on it right now, so you don't necessarily need to go look for it. If you want to email me, my email is there. Use the St. Mary's one on the top, dwm1@stmarys-ca.edu. And thanks for your attention, and I'll see you on the trail.